Before this video starts, I just want to talk about the direction where I would like to plan on moving with this channel. So initially I started this channel based on the foundation of politics. Then last video I tried to talk about incorporating a gaming aspect. But now I think I honestly just want to move in a more free-form direction. Because the reason why my upload, my upload schedule was very bad was because it was super hard for me to come up with ideas and to not just do the most same repetitive tier lists and things that I've done too many times. So I think moving in a more free-form way and kind of just making vids about things that pique my interest at a certain time and you really never know what you're gonna get. I'm gonna have more frequent ideas of it to upload more. Because obviously now I'm jumping to music out from gaming, from politics, so there's a lot of things I'm interested in. I'm one of those people that just gets hit with an idea and I'm like, I gotta make a video about this. So I just think that this will be good for the channel health and the upload frequency in general. And I'm sorry if this disappoints anybody who again is here for gaming, who's here for politics, but I just think that this is the best route. Alright, we're doing something a little different today. Today I'm gonna go into what I personally believe are, with honorable mentions included, my top 14 or so albums of the year. I haven't talked about music yet on this channel, so my music taste is probably going to come off as a surprise to some people, but I do want to preface some things. Number one, I'm one of those pretentious motherfuckers, so there's going to be albums on here that, you're going to be like, what is this? I never heard of it. And there's going to be some generic picks and some more obvious picks. And I do want to preface big pop bias this year. I'm not really a big pop fan, but this year pop music has absolutely blown everything out of the water. I did try to include at least a few albums from each genre if I believed that they were here to make it. But yeah, I mean, let's just get into the list. So my first honorable mention, we're going to go with Let's Start Here by Lil Yachty. So I know this record was kind of hit or miss for some people. And I think it was completely out of left field from Lil Yachty, and none of us expected. Let's be real, none of us expected this album. But I think this album is, honestly, I think it's his best release to date, and I really like the experimental direction he took. And there were just some mind-blowing tracks to this album. I mean, the Black Seminole is one of the best songs of the year. And I know a lot of people just like and listen to that song, but the album in general is just a great album. It's a great listening experience, and you get a lot out of it. And there's so many different songs and so many different feels that he approaches, and again, nobody expected it. But next we're gonna have the Live at Bush Hall from Black Country New Road. This one personally, I know. Again, this was one that again people were kind of hit or miss on. 7 out of 10 kind of feel, but love this album. I will say, big, massive Black Country New Road fan. Their first two records, I think Answer Up There is one of the best albums of all time, and I think their self-titled is a fantastic album as well. And I think this live album's great too. I think it sucks to see the band having to losing their lead singer and Isaac, but I mean, obviously, mental health problems. Hope he's doing good, but honestly, despite this was a fantastic live album, I think I didn't really want to include this on there because it was a live album, so that's mostly why it's an honorable mention. I do think it had potential to contend for my top 10 spots, but it's either just outside of it or I got the excuse that it's a live album, so that's not I didn't include it. Well, we're going with Soft Scars by yall. This is personally my first exposure to her as an artist, and it did not disappoint. I definitely want to look into her more. It's a very noisy glitch pop, even kind of elements of shoegaze type of record, and it honestly caught me off guard. When I initially saw it being really highly touted and looked into it, it kind of didn't seem like something I'd be interested in, but it did take me by storm. I will admit, I think a lot of people like this album a lot more than I do, but I do think it's still a great record, and obviously it's an honorable mention for me. And if you aren't really into this kind of genre, I still recommend listening to it because I would argue it's one of the best noise pop albums in the last 5 years. So check it out. Next up, we're going with my mainstream pick. We're going with Utopia by Travis Scott. This record it's great. It's bloated, but it's a great addition to his discography. I personally have it as a second best album, and if some people prefer Astroworld, but I think that Utopia had a very good crop of tracks. I think that it was I'd say it's his most experimental record by far, and definitely switched things up. And my problem with Astroworld initially was that a lot of the songs just kind of sounded the same, but this album he really tried to take a risk and really push a boundary that he hadn't touted before. So I think it's a great record. I think that it's a little bloated. That's probably why it doesn't crack my top 10, but of course it's right there. Great honorable mention. Now we move on to the actual top 10. And we're coming in with Desire I Want to Turn Into You by Caroline Polachek. The best art pop album I have heard in the last decade. It is a fantastic record. Caroline Polachek is a fantastic artist to begin with. I knew this would be a good one, but honestly, it even caught me off guard because it is by far her best release. It is powerful. Her vocal performances are at their absolute best they have been yet, and it's one of those albums that really it really pushes the limit of its genre. And I recommend it to literally any of you. And it might be hard to pick up at first, but if it clicks with you, it clicks. And listen to it. It's good. Number 9, we're going with Scared the Hose by JPEG Mafia and Danny Brown. I mean, we knew this collab album was going to be great, and it honestly didn't disappoint. It's a good record. I will say, personally, I do find it to be overrated. I think a lot of people are putting this in their top 3, number 1. And while I love the record, I do think there's songs that I could do without, but I think that everything leading up to this record was great. I think the EP release with the extra tracks on it was great. I think that JPEG and Danny both held their ground on the record and both came at it from 2 separate directions that created this they're just a fantastic dynamic. It's one of the best one of the best collab hip hop albums of all time, almost, I would argue. And it's a fantastic record. Highly recommended if you love Peggy or love Danny because the fusion is absolutely there and the chemistry is unmatched. Next, I'm going with How Do You Sleep at Night by Tizo Touchdown. This one, again, maybe a record that some people didn't like as much as me, but I love this record. I think that Tizo's sound is so unique, and I think that going into this record, I didn't know how it was going to sound because I've heard him on different features, and he never sounded the same. I love the sound that he went for this record. It's a hilarious album. It has a lot of comedy elements, but it has a lot of experimental hip hop. It's so hard to put into words what type of genre it is. I think his voice is absolutely amazing. I think front to back every track on this album is unique in its own way and it has its place. I think this record is super underrated and I absolutely love it. All right, we're going with Mitski, The Land is Inhospitable, and So Are We. So initially, upon listening to this record, I didn't think much of it. I honestly thought it was a little boring. And my experience with Mitski generally is I think that overall, while I think she's a good artist, I do have a hard time with some of her records being a little too bloated, a little too slow for me. But I think this record, beautiful, beautiful vocal performances. I'd argue it is her best vocal performances to date, and by far her strongest crop of tracks. I mean, front to back, there's not a single miss on this album. If you love Mitski, if you love Be the Cowboy, this is her. I would argue this is a complete step up, and it's a great record, and I highly recommend it. If you know me, you know I hate country. I don't like country at all. And hey, you might love country. I respect it, but it's just not for me. And that's what is truly crazy. This album redefines modern country. I think that this is by far one of the best country albums of the 2010s already. Or I guess we're in the 2020s now, but I'd argue it wipes most things in the last 20 years. I don't like modern country. I don't love the sound, but Zach Bryan took the sound and he did it at his absolute best, and a lot of fusions of pop, but I mean it still has that country feel to it, but there definitely is a pop fusion. I think he's a great vocalist. I think he's a great songwriter. There are songs on it I can do without, but it's a long album, but I think that the hits are absolutely there. Songs like Tourniquet are music to my ears. It's a fantastic album. Next up, everybody knew this one was gonna be on here. I'm going Javelin from Sufjan Stevens. This record's a masterpiece, I would argue, to a lot of people, and to me, I think it's great. Personally, it's not my favorite of his releases that would go to Carrie and Lowell, but I love this record. I think it's a very personal record from him, and I think that the performances on it are some of his best to date, and the fact that he's still putting out music of this quality this far into his career is unbelievable. I mean, Sufjan Stevens is just probably the most consistent underground artist there is, arguably. And this album did push him out there. And I know a lot of people picked him up from this album. That's really good to hear, because if you haven't listened to Sufjan, you haven't heard him before, check him out. He's made some great records. Number 4, we're going with This Is Why by Paramore. This is maybe Paramore's best album, and it's this far into their career. Hayley Williams' vocal performances on this album sound like they're just coming straight out of her prime. Like, the fact that they're, again, and as I said with Sufjan, they're this far into their career and still putting out albums of this quality is unbelievable. This record's great. This record does not have a single miss front to back. And every song is memorable. Every song is so catchy. This is their catchiest album to date, I would argue. And that's saying a lot for Paramore. But I think that Hayley's leading vocals and Hayley's like work on the front of this record is unbelievable. Number 3, we're going with
Did You Know That There's a Tunnel Under Ocean Boulevard
by Lana Del Rey. This record, I like Lana a lot. I'm a big Lana fan. This might be Lana's best record to date. It might be. It's long, but it's there. It's literally there. By far, without a doubt, her best songwriter today. I don't think Lana's particularly the strongest songwriter ever, but this album, she definitely brought her A game. She pulled out the stops, and you can see it. It's strong, and it's well done. And I think that while there may not be as many standout tracks on this album, every track is great in their own way, and every track flows together perfectly to create like her most cohesive and most working album by far. And number 2, we're going with Hell Mode by Jeff Rosenstock. I mean, he's still kicking, still putting out bangers to this date. Very, like, you know, an artist that a lot of people haven't heard of, and honestly, treat yourself. This album is so good. The instrumentations on this album and the vocal performances and there's so many catchy songs in this album. Like Liked You Better, the opener track, it is one of the most catchy. It is by far I would argue it's the most catchy album of the year. This or number 1, and I think that every song on this album has so much replay value, and I think that it's a fairly cohesive album for his matter, like for Jeff's work. And I think that if you like a lot of his other past releases, I think this is one of his best albums to date, so I can't recommend it anymore. All right, coming in at number 1 for my album of the year, I'm going Guts by Olivia Rodrigo. Some may say generic pop album, some may not feel it like I do, but I adore this record. I think that this album blows Sour, which is another album I love, out the water, and I think that this is one of the best pop albums. I think it's one of the best pop albums of all time. I'll say it. I'll admit it. I think that Olivia Rodrigo does the sound so well, and despite like you may think that the songwriting is really like rudimentary and like not there, but it's the fact that she takes like that rudimentary mainstream pop sound, but does it literally to perfection. Her vocal performances on this album are fantastic. I love the like punk rock and the pop fusions. I love like the tracks that go from very upbeat and very like punky to very like pop and very melodic. I think that the album's pacing is perfect. I don't think there is a single miss on this album, and it deserves to sweep in the awards because it is such a good record. And honestly, I didn't think this year was that strong for music, but I'm very happy that this album came out because this album does it for me. I fucking love this album. And if you guys disagree, I want to see it down in the comments. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate it, and have a good day. See you.